Last week, I was lucky enough to go hands-on with the new Donkey Kong Bananza game for Nintendo Switch 2. This is the first new Donkey Kong game since Tropical Freeze released back on the Wii U in 2014, so over a decade ago, and it's the first new 3D Donkey Kong game we've had since Donkey Kong 64 released on the Nintendo 64, almost 30 years ago at this point. So needless to say, this is a moment fans have been waiting for a long time, and I'm happy to say that despite some issues, we'll get into it, the performance I don't think is the greatest in this game. Overall, my thoughts on this game are pretty positive. It is a fun Donkey Kong game. It feels great to control Donkey Kong. It feels great to just destroy the environment, go on an absolute rampage, and that is what we are going to talk about today. Of course, if you are new here and you enjoy Donkey Kong Bonanza content, but also Nintendo Switch 2 coverage, I would appreciate you subscribing. Let's get into it. Alrighty folks, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my hands-on preview of Donkey Kong Bonanza. Apologies in advance for the lower quality recording here. My proper Sony camera had died at this point, so I was using my iPhone, so the lighting's a little bit weird. It might be a little bit harder to read the text. I also had to zoom in. Nintendo has this weird rule about like, oh, if you're recording at an event, you need to have your shoulder in the shot or whatever, so apologies for that. But yeah, Donkey Kong Bonanza. So this is one of the biggest games they announced in the Nintendo Direct, right? This is what they ended their showcase on, and I was honestly a little skeptical at first. I was like, I don't know if this is what I wanted, right? Because we're assuming right now that it's being made by the 3D Mario team. There's a lot of hallmarks of that team's kind of DNA in this game so far. So a lot of us are thinking, okay, this is the 3D Mario team. And to me, as someone who loves 3D Mario, like above most things, it's like, oh, well, I'd rather have a 3D Mario. But having actually played this game now, as long as that 3D Mario isn't 7 years away because of Bananza, I am very happy that this team is doing something very different. This is a very unique 3D platformer because I haven't really played any where the entire point is just to destroy the environment. I mean, this game is really just about destroying everything in your sights, and you're gonna see all the particles flying everywhere. Very impressive for a Nintendo game, and because of that, it just feels very different from anything this team has made before. Once again, assuming it is the 3D Mario team. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. However, there is one thing about this game that immediately I was like, okay, this has to be the Odyssey team, or at least a project being co-developed by them. The movements. The movement in this game reminds me so much of Odyssey, and I know that's going to be great to hear for a lot of people because the movement in Odyssey is great, especially if you love doing like Luigi's Balloon World or even just speedrunning and stuff like that. The movement in that game was so fluid. The way you could connect all of Mario's movements to just kind of make this beautiful art form of traversing the areas. I am happy to say that seems to be back in Donkey Kong Bonanza, maybe even more so than it was in Odyssey. So there's this move, I think you press ZL, and you can pull up a big boulder. And if you press the like roll button at the same time, which is either L or ZL, it's one of those, you swap them, you basically start spinning around on a Beyblade, and this is so satisfying, but then you can like jump off of that, do another roll, and kind of just keep comboing it. The movement in this game is really, really fascinating to me, and I really think the best game I can compare it to is Odyssey. When you're throwing Cappy, you're doing the hop off of him, throwing it again, doing a dive, like, that is how fluid the moveset for DK feels in this game, which is just awesome. I mean, that is the best part of Odyssey. So to see at least a little bit of that coming over here is really exciting. That being said, at least from the two areas I got to play in the demo, it's the opening Ingot Isle, I believe it's called, as well as this lagoon area. I'm not sure if the level design is going to lend itself that well to moving around the map like that, because they want you to, dig down, they want you to punch up, they want you to go into these caves and caverns and look for all of the gold Banandium that's hidden around, right? Movement might also inherently be a little less important to how you're playing the game, because DK can climb anything. When you walk up to a wall, he just immediately starts clinging to it and walking up it. Whereas in Odyssey, a lot of the fun of that game for me was like, okay, how can I use my moveset to get to an area that either maybe I'm not even supposed to get to yet, or just get there a little bit earlier, right? Like, there was a lot of fun in the challenge of that. The movement in this game feels really good, but I just wonder if the level design and the objectives you have will necessarily lend itself to making that moveset feel as good as it possibly can, if that makes sense. And speaking of the objectives, so this is another sign that this is being made, at least in part, by the Mario Odyssey team. When DK finds one of the big bananas, it is literally like the exact same screen as when you get a moon in Mario Odyssey. He says, "Ooh, banana," and it pops up. The font looks similar, even the UI and everything. Like, everything about this image right here looks similar to when you get a moon in Mario Odyssey. It feels very similar. I will say, for those that are not a fan of Mario Odyssey's moon collecting, I know a lot of people, at least when it came out, were critical because a lot of the moons felt like they were too pointless. They were just kind of sitting around. The bananas in this game at times can feel even less important because I was just, punching around, digging in this ground area, and I found a banana just completely randomly in there. There was no puzzle. It was just sitting in there. So I'm not sure exactly on the hierarchy of collectibles in this. I think this would be equivalent to a moon. So for it to just be kind of sitting there felt a little weird. Even in Odyssey, usually there was like, okay, well, this is, you're going to go and do this platforming challenge, and then there's a moon up here, or, something like that. In this game, sometimes there's just bananas laying around, but they feel as important as a moon when you grab them because they do this whole little cutscene. It's a little weird, but it's hard to get a full vibe for it because this is just a 20-minute demo. So I'll reserve judgments on that until we see the full game and see how many bananas there are to collect. I will say, though, it's hard to get a feel for this from a 20-minute demo because I'm kind of rushing through. I want to see as much as I can before the timer's up, but I love completing 3D Mario games. I love going for 100%, 200%, whatever the case is. I love doing everything there is to do in a game like this. I think this might be a bad game to demo for me because I have collector OCD and I want to grab everything I'm seeing as I go through. And there is so much gold hidden everywhere. They want you to destroy everything as you go through these levels. So I know when I'm playing this at home in the comfort of my house, no time limit, like, I'm going to be so meticulous about how I destroy everything, how I collect all of this gold, making sure I get every single speck of it that I can see. And that's going to be so much fun because just destroying stuff in this game does feel really good. It feels really satisfying, and it's just like you have this good impact to it, right? DK's punches have a good impact. You feel it when he's destroying a wall and it's just going crazy and everything around you is falling apart. It's unlike any other game I've really played before. I guess the closest comparison I can think of in terms of like destructible environments would maybe be like a Crackdown game on Xbox 360. That's really the only thing I can think. So this is a very unique take on a 3D platformer from Nintendo, but it is very satisfying. I do have one complaint, and I mentioned this in my overall hands-on preview of the entire event. When you are digging down, when you're in like a full tunnel system that you've created from punching down with DK or punching left or right, whatever, it can be a little disorienting because it does like this weird half opacity effect where you can kind of see out of the tunnel, and then you can kind of get mixed up. My friend Dan said he literally got lost very early on because you go down and then it's like, okay, well, what's going on? It's just a little disorienting. So I'm not sure if that's something they can really fix before launch. I don't know what they could do to kind of circumvent that, but it is worth noting it's a little disorienting when you're down in the caves. The camera, it just like, it doesn't really work that well when there's walls all around you. Here we have this awesome cutscene where DK gets swept away. One of my favorite things about this game so far is how unique the enemies look, but more importantly, Donkey Kong himself, dude, he is so expressive. He's always sticking out that tongue. You can like whistle when you're just sitting idle, and it's just really cute. DK is adorable in this game. I really love his look and his animations. The most expressive he has ever been, for sure. There his pants go, so now he's naked. I'm excited to see like what kind of costumes they have. They haven't shown any, but there's going to be costumes in this game like Mario Odyssey. I would imagine, they're going to go crazy with it. I wouldn't even be surprised if there's like a low poly DK64 skin you could get. That'd be really cool. Now let's take a look at the second level I got to try out. I think it's called Lagoon or something. There's some sort of a lagoon here, but also it popped up there. It said Ape Cape. I'm not sure what the exact name is. Got the banana, of course. DK doing some whistling. Very adorable. But this level we actually have Odd Rock. Now, his abilities are interesting because I don't think we've ever had a Nintendo game that has guidance like this, almost like a Witcher vision, because I think if Donkey Kong does like a hand clap, it'll show any Banandium or any other hidden objectives laying around, right, through walls. I can't think of another Nintendo game that has like a Witcher vision like that, or like the Batman Arkham vision that Batman has in those games. You know what I'm talking about? Where like a little like line will show through, or it'll tell you where to go. I can't really think of another Nintendo game off the top of my head that does that in that way. But it was this Lagoon level where a major issue I have with DK Bananza so far actually popped up for me, and that is the performance, which I was not expecting from a Nintendo game on their new 4K 120 hertz console. However, in this level in particular, I noticed when I opened the map, it's hard to tell on the camera. My iPhone was recording at 30 FPS because my good camera died. the frame rate like falls apart here. Now, what's cool about the map is it actually saves all of your terrain damage that you've done, so it's going to load everything in real time. So I imagine that is very intensive on the Switch 2's memory and all that. So maybe that's why the frame rate is exploding there. It's really hard to see. I got a lot of comments being like, no, dude, you're wrong. The frame rate's not bad. Trust me, guys, the frame rate was not good in this level, especially when you open the map. That is the key thing. It's also a little weird when you're doing stuff like I'm doing right here on the screen, going through this cave, making my own path. It can get a little framey, which I just wasn't expecting from a Switch 2 game. This is the first time in 2 decades Nintendo has been pushing graphics in a way where they're talking about frame rates and HDR and everything. I just wasn't expecting one of their main premier titles to really have any issues. Here you can see me just going down to see how far I can go. But I will say, you know, even with there being frame rate issues in this demo, and even though the game comes out in, 3 months, I'm confident that this team will have it fixed up by the time that we have our hands on it. I remember when Mario Odyssey was shown back at January 2017 presentation for Switch, and even at E3 2017, versus the final product, that game got cleaned up a lot in those final months of development. So I do have faith that by the time we actually play this at home, they will have these issues sorted out. But I just wanted to mention it, you know, there is frame rate issues in this game, which I was not expecting. I also might have noticed the frame rate more than I would have otherwise because I had just come off of playing Metroid Prime 4 Beyond at 120 FPS and Mario Kart World Split Screen at 60 FPS. Like, maybe I was just a little bit more sensitive to it because every other game I was playing at this event ran so well, but it did stick out to me. It absolutely did. So I gotta mention it. I gotta be critical when it is necessary. DK Bananza, get your frame rate sorted out. Now, I do briefly want to touch on a leak that happened. I think it was on Nintendo Korea's website or something like that, but we had an updated look at the key art for this game where instead of having Oddrock on his shoulder, spoiler alert if you don't want to see what will likely be the actual box art for this game, maybe we'll see it in the next trailer, it looks like Donkey Kong's gonna have a Kid Pauline with him, or maybe that Kid Pauline gets turned into Oddrock and we just haven't seen that yet. Very interesting stuff. I gotta be honest, I didn't think I'd be this invested in like the lore of Donkey Kong, but I'm very curious to see how this makes sense. Is this a prequel? Like, I mean, it actually must be, right? Because if it's a young Pauline, if that is literally Pauline, which knowing Nintendo, it probably is. How is that going to fit into the Donkey Kong chronology? You know, how is this actually going to fit in to all of the other games? Because in this level, you can actually find Cranky Kong and he'll reference like an old rival or something along those lines. I couldn't find him. I was looking all over. There's like a platforming challenge up high that you need to find. I just completely missed it while I was doing whatever I'm doing on screen right now. Here's what I'm talking about though. Here's just a random banana. I understand, like, okay, it's a nook behind concrete, so, like, it was technically a puzzle, but, like, I don't know, man. I just found that completely randomly. It didn't feel like it was designed with intent at all. It's just like, oh, here's a banana, and there's another one right there. So that's what I mean when I say the bananas feel like they're kind of just placed in places. I'm sure some of them will feel more important than others, just like the moons did, but I did feel like they were placed a little randomly, more so than the moons are in Odyssey. But yeah, this whole young Pauline business is very interesting, especially because obviously DK has always been intrinsically linked to music. In this game, he's even whistling. You have your clap that makes some, you know, music reverberations. Is this gonna be the origin story of Pauline in like New Donk City? Because in that, of course, she's a famous singer. She's the mayor of New Donk City, but she's also a singer. Is this how she's going to get her love of music? Is it going to be because of Donkey Kong and the events that unfold in Bananza? I don't know, but I did find it very interesting, and I'm excited to see that trailer where we actually see young Pauline and how that will be incorporated into the gameplay, because she has that like bracelet on her arm. I'm guessing she can turn into Oddrock and also turn back into just herself. It's going to be interesting. I don't know if that's going to be like a gameplay mechanic where you're transforming her as you play through to do certain mechanics or certain puzzles or something, but I am definitely curious about how this is all going to play out here. Now, what you've been watching on screen was me doing this objective to fix the water shortage. I killed those enemies, and I actually got to sublayer 101. However, that's as far as the demo goes. It actually resets me back to the beginning here of the lagoon area. So they didn't let me go any further than I guess what the treehouse did. I don't think the treehouse showed off of that area, but now I'm back to sublevel 100 here. And this was the moment I was like, all right, I'm finding Cranky Kong. Unfortunately, I do not find Cranky Kong. However, I do find the final thing I really want to touch on in this video, And that is these challenge levels where you will find these purple seals, and you have to whistle to make them go away with Odd Rock. And then once you go inside, they are these completely separated challenges that are very similar to, let's say, the Floodless levels in Super Mario Sunshine, or even the little challenge areas that were in Mario Odyssey. And this is what I'm actually excited to see way more of. I think this is where that movement is really going to shine, because at least from the ones I played, it's not as much about destruction. It is about doing something in a time limit, or, you know, doing a platforming challenge. One of the challenges I did was just based on killing a certain amount of enemies in the time limits, but the enemies were all like hanging up high, so you actually had to pick up their boulders and throw them back at them, which was really cool. And then the other one that I didn't get to finish because my time unfortunately ran out was this kind of climbing challenge where you have to climb over this girder and kill the enemies on your way to get to the other end. This is where I think the movement is really going to shine, and in fact, this is actually where I realized, like, oh snap, the movement is really good. I started like trying to combo and learn the tech here of how a Donkey Kong Bonanza speedrun will go. I think it feels really good. I'm excited to see more of these levels and how hard they get. I imagine this is where like the real challenge is going to be for a lot of the bananas, but also, once again, just that movement, dude. I'm so curious to see how, you know, the people that broke Mario Odyssey, how are they going to break this game open and make that movement really look like something special, because I know it's in there. I just didn't have enough time to really mess with it and experiment to get it working on that level. So that is going to do it for my Donkey Kong Bonanza preview. I am very excited to get my hands on the full game on July 17th. And while I do have some issues with like the frame rates and how it feels a little disorienting when you're digging underground, I am very excited to see how all of the levels play out, the challenge levels, how many bananas there are, the costumes. Like, there's so many unanswered questions about this game that I can't wait to see more of. And, you know, the movement, once again, the movement is what I'm really excited to see, just how people break this game open, how speedruns look. That's always one of the best things of a new Mario game, and now it's going to be, I think, one of the best parts of a new Donkey Kong game. One final thing before we end off the video, I wanted to talk about the developer of this game. Now, we're all looking at it, we're all assuming, okay, it's EPD8, it is the 3D Mario team, and they definitely have a hand in this, no doubt. However, I wonder if it's possible that it's not entirely them. The reason I say this is because there is a little bit of a jank to it that I would not expect from the 3D Mario team, be it the camera, be it the frame rates, be it the entire concept of just destroying things and not having as much structure to the levels. It feels a little lesser than an Odyssey, in my opinion. So maybe this is cope because I want the 3D Mario of my dreams to come out next year. However, this kind of feels like a smaller project to me, almost as if it could have maybe started as a Switch 1 game that later became a Switch 2 game. They were like, let's just save it. And I was thinking that maybe this is actually being co-developed by EPD8, of course, the 3D Mario team would be involved. What if a bulk of the development and the level design and all that, what if it's actually being handled by Nintendo Software Technology, NST? They have experience working with the 3D Mario team in major capacities. This would be their biggest break yet. However, they did do Captain Toad on the Nintendo Switch alongside its new levels, but they also did 3D World and Bowser's Fury, once again in collaboration with EPD8. But what if this is their big break? What if this is actually primarily an NST developed game, and we're still getting that 3D Mario? Because as someone who's always analyzing the business of Nintendo and what games come out when, and when it makes sense to release X, Y, or Z game, I find it hard to believe there's not a 3D Mario that's either done, or at least very close to being done, releasing in the next 18 months or so. It'd be weird if that team was working on Donkey Kong this entire time. So I wonder, could this be a Nintendo Software Technology game? I'm not committed to this theory, but I do think it's worth considering. So let me know what you think of that in the comments down below. I think there's a pretty good chance. Nintendo is also being very cagey about who's developing this game. Now, that's not necessarily a new thing. However, when it's one of like your main developers, you would think like, okay, let's tell them who's making this game. Though I suppose they also haven't told us who's making Mario Kart World, and we all know what EPD group that is. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I think even if it is just the 3D Mario team, this does kind of feel like a smaller project. Maybe until we see another trailer that shows way more worlds and I'll be blown away. Maybe my tune will change on that. But as it stands, it does kind of give like smaller side project vibes. I'm not sure exactly why. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe here for more DK Bonanza coverage, content, theories, all that fun stuff, and more Nintendo Switch 2 content as well, of course. You can follow me on Twitter at BoTalksGames. Check out my other channel at It's Amiibo, and click on one of these two videos on the screen right now to listen to me ramble even more about some Nintendo Switch 2 goodness. Until next time, folks, peace!